Welcome to Let's Make a Game Platformer, episode 19. In last episode, I've added support for game objects or models, which allowed me to add the star as well as the Duke as a character, and the stars can be consumed now. Okay, so what I'd like to do in this episode is allow the characters to be the models to be rotated. For example, I want the star to spin all the time around its y-axis, and I want to also have the Duke turn left or right depending on what was the last direction in X direction, so positive or negative, that it was moving towards last time. Okay, so what I'll do first is I'll do a little bit of cleaning up. First of all, I move the two components that are about models to the rendering package, and about the collecting the collectible package. I should probably never store stuff randomly. Okay. Second thing I want to do is create two new components. First component is going to be model rotate component, which will specify how the model should be rotated before it's rendered. So the same way we had the location component that specified how it's going to be moved, the location and stuff. The same way we'll have a component that specifies the rotation around y-axis at the moment. So get rotate y. And in addition to that, I want to add yet one more component. As I said, two components. Which is going to be constant model rotation component, which will define the angle per second. We specify this in degrees. Maybe get degrees per second. Okay. So I will now modify the model renderer. First of all, because we want to rotate around the axis that is defined basically by the translate x, y, and z, therefore we have to, well, first we have to separate these translates into two separate translates. So this is where the math and geometry comes in useful. We want to translate by character render translate x, character render translate y, character render translate z, because that's how we define the middle of the model. So we want to rotate around the middle or the origin point of the model. In case of star, the origin is going to be in the middle, in the x direction. The same is for the Duke. Okay, so now we have these two separated. I'll create here, rather than on each rendering for each model, I create a new matrix. I'll just identity. I'll just make the current existing transformation into an identity and then translate it. Okay, now I will do a check. First of all, I'll get component model rotate component rotation, and if model has a rotation defined for it, it doesn't have to. If it has, I will rotate it around the y-axis. Rotate. We want to use the one with degrees. So y-axis, this is y-axis, and rotation, get rotate y. Okay, so now the model will be rotated by whatever the rotation is specified by the rotate component. And I'll add a new system, model rotation system, which will be responsible for constantly rotating things. Register system, we will need time manager because we know that it's based on time. And in the rotate models, in the game loop update event, so on every update, we'll iterate through all the entities that have both of those components, so constant model rotation and model rotate component. Okay, to do that, I will use, to speed it up, I'll create an index. So I'll need index manager, and in the initialize, so I'll need live system, live cycle system, and in initialize method I will create an index for these two components, so constant model rotation and model rotate component. Rotating entities. Okay, so I'll go through all the rotating entities. Rotating entity, I'll get a time. I'll divide it by 1000 because this is time in milliseconds. I want time in seconds. Seconds since start. And rotating entity get component constant model rotation. Model rotation and rotating entity get component model rotate rotation. Let's call this rotation rate. And I will set the rotation. I'll have to introduce a setter for it, for the value. And I will set the rotation based on the rotation rate, get degrees per second multiplied by seconds since start. And I have to save the entity, save changes to the entity. Okay, so this will rotate all the entities, and so what I need now is to modify the star prefab to add two new components to it. First of all, model rotate component, and second of all, constant model rotation component, and what was the name? Degrees per second. Degrees per second. And what I need is 180 degrees. So we will do a half spin in 1 second. Okay, let me run it and see the result. Okay, something is not working. Let me make sure degrees per second. Degrees per second. The rotation. Render. Rotate. Y. Let me set a breakpoint here. according to this, the start does not have these two components, which is a PT. Okay, let me check spelling. Model rotate component. Let me just copy these names just in case. Copy, not cut. Okay, this is surprising. I guess it's a debugging time. Okay, so that was a silly mistake here. So the rendering entity I should be checking is the entity ref. That's why on add here I might modify the names of all the objects here in this class. I haven't finished refactoring. We have characters index. This should be models index, model render. Model. Object removed and object added. Model shape. Okay, so after fixing this, it should work now. Let's check. Okay, so the reason why it looks like this is because it's rotating not around the... So this is a cube that's rotating around one of its corners. So I have to modify it to that to move it by 0.5, the z-axis. Now it should be rotating fine, although it's not going to look the way we want it to look yet. I have to do one more change. Okay, so the change I want to do is, I think it should be minus 0.5 to look fine. So the change I want to do is to allow to specify a multiplier for x, y, and z coordinates whenever we create the model. So for example, we want the start to be completely flat. The same we will do for Duke To do this, I have to modify the way I create the. Okay, that's what I want, more or less. You can imagine that this is a cube here. Okay, so to modify it, let me just to demonstrate it, how it's looking, is for a second do all our sides to demonstrate it's a cube that's rotating correctly. And to change to be able to specify that the star is actually completely flat in the z-axis, I'll have to modify the way the model is created. And okay, now you can see that this is actually a cube that is rotating around its middle. Okay, so as I said, I have to modify the way it's created, and here I have to specify the multiplies. And to do that, I have to add a couple of different possible getters to the model shape component. So it's going to be multiply x, multiply y, multiply z. So we can stretch objects and squeeze objects and so on. And in the model renderer here, I have to model shape get multiply x, model shape get multiply y, model shape get multiply z. Okay, so now in the star prefab, in the model star, I'll specify multiply x1, multiply y1, and multiply z 0. So we want it to be completely flat in the z axis. We have to make sure that our player model also has these values at 1, or actually want to have it at 0 as well. Want to have it flat as well. And that should do it, I think. Let me try. So now no longer this requires translate z, because it's a flat, so we don't have to translate it. We don't have to move the axis around it. It's going to be rotated around in the z direction because there is no z direction anymore. Okay, almost. So what is the problem now? Okay, it's refactoring time. Okay, I did not modify anything and it started working. I guess there was some old version loaded of classes. So now when I start it, the star rotates. The only problem is that it rotates the middle of the star is at the moment at position 0 in the z direction. If you want it to be in the middle of the block on which it stands, we have to move the coordinates here by 0.5. So the star has to be stuck in the middle of the block between 0 and 1. So once we do this, we should be getting the effect that we want. Or the star is actually rotating here in the middle of the block. At the moment it's on the edge of this block on the left side. That's because it's centered, and the center of is defined as the base of it here. So we have to move it half a block to the right. So -5. And now it's going to be rotating exactly on the middle of the leftmost block. This is just placement for looks mostly. And so our player coordinates also at the moment are not in the middle of the block, and I would probably want to have them in the middle. Okay, so if you look from the top, it's now rotating nicely in the middle of the block, and we catch it and we exit. Okay, so I will now modify the player prefab as well to move the player half a block to the front. So it's going to be in the middle of the block once again in the Z direction. And now we have to change it so that whenever we move to left or right, it rotates. Okay, so let's add a new component, because why not? Rotate model on movement component. And we'll have two float values here. Angle left, get angle right. Let's do a stand component. And in the model rotation system, in the update methods, once again, we'll add a new index, rotate model on movement component and model rotate component. And movement rotation entities. We'll iterate through them. And they also have to have the physics. This is kinetic objects for velocity, yes. So we need those, and we'll get the movement rotation entity. Movement rotation entity get component kinetic object component. Kinetic object and movement rotation entity get component rotate model on movement component. And rotate component class and if kinetic object get velocity, so we'll get velocity x. If velocity x is less than 0, then we will set rotate to rotate on movement get angle left because we are turning left towards negative x. Else if velocity x greater than 0, so we're moving right, rotate z, rotate y, rotate on movement, again angle right. And finally, movement rotation entity, save the component, save changes. Okay, so now we have to modify the player component to have these two components because it already has kinetic objects, so it has to have the model rotate component and rotate model on movement component with angle left and angle right. Angle left, so if it's left we want to turn it 180 degrees, angle right is going to be 0 degrees, so the way it is at the moment. So let's try it. So now our Duke should be turning left and right depending on which direction we are moving, and turning as in its immediate turn, so it's not like slow turn. This is something we can add later. Moving left, moving right, awesome. Great. Okay, I think that's it for this episode. Make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.